Thank you, Chief. I'm out of time. You got
Yes,
your
sir.
2 minutes back, though.
That's it. I do.
Thank you, Chief.
If anybody has any questions, please call me, email me, come by and see me.
We're going to adjourn Employee and Community Relations. Move now to Utilities with Mrs. Woods. Discuss the water plant control system contract.
Thank you. So tonight we have Resolution 2023-40 up for a second reading. Rick, can I count on you to give us what will happen under this agreement? It's little over $261,000. So the need and
Yeah,
if we need
and,
it done tonight, can you let me know?
Yeah, Chief Operator Hall's here to answer a little bit of questions. He's got most of the background.
Thank you.
So I'm going to kind of turn it over to him.
Sure.
Hi, for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm David Hall. I'm the chief operator out at the water treatment plant. Yeah, about 2.5 years ago, we started this process of upgrading our technology out of the plant. We got 23-year-old equipment that's actually 25, 26-year-old technology. It's starting to fail. So far, our filter control consoles have already failed, and actually in the last month, one of our units out at the new Gambia Road booster station actually failed. Luckily, we've already been in the process of replacing that. Next week, we're going to do startup on that. Once we get New Gambia Road started up, we want to shift to our filter control units. So, and that's what we're here to discuss is this next contract for that.
Okay.
So,
I know they really want to get started on this, so if there's questions you guys want to ask tonight, my intention is to go ahead and waive the third reading, but I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with it. I think we've demonstrated over and over and over we've got some issues out there at the water treatment plant. So are there concerns?
After touring it with you, I think my concern would be not moving forward.
Yeah, I would note that council has asked about the contract, and I've had the opportunity to review the contract, and there will be no changes. We'll be able to sign it as is.
Thank you.
And refresh my memory, that was a set number?
Yes.
yeah, set number for a very specific project.
A long ways from 100,000 first year and don't know the next two.
I appreciate that too.
So you want to move it forward?
I want to move
Yeah.
this forward tonight if everybody's okay with
Yes.
that. So,
Any objections?
okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move now to Planning and Zoning. Mr. Hillier, an annexation request. Mr. Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, you received an email from Mr. Bourne late last night explaining some of the questions we had. We got an ordinance late today that we're expected to pass tonight with the annexation on Martinsburg Road. I had emailed Rob and I said, to be within the law, do we need to pass this tonight? What happens if we don't? There are members of council who may not have even seen this in the mail. His answer was, we're actually a day late, but that'll be excused by the air, and the answer was yes. I don't know why we need a committee meeting. We're forced to annex it.
No, we have to. We have to. First of all, we're not annexing it. There are 3 things that we're doing tonight. Number 1, the commissioners have sent this up, and so we have to respond to it. The revised code says we have 20 days from the date that they put it on their agenda. That's not my decision or anyone else's. It's in the revised code.
Can I interrupt with real quick? I'll read you the title. I'm not going to put in all those numbers. Mr. Hill does a better job. An ordinance consenting to the annexation of 105 acres. We're consenting to the annexation. So to me, that means we're approving the annexation.
Well,
And it also states that we'll offer police, fire, emergency services, and stormwater utility. So that's what but we're consenting to the annexation. Thank you. Go ahead.
consent is once again a word that comes out of the Ohio Revised Code. In section, it's 709.023D. The municipal corporation is required to either consent or withhold its consent. That consent is based upon the factors listed in 709.023E that I listed for all of you. This is the consent to the annexation. It is not agreeing to the annexation. That happens down the road. And that is not bound by anything. So council does not, this does not mean that we will annex it. It means that we agree, that we consent to the continuing of the procedure. That's the way that this effectively goes. And these are all terms that I didn't make up. These all come out of the Ohio Revised Code. We're stuck with them.
Mr. Hilliard,
Can I
I'm
ask-
sorry. This same property, we just annexed a tiny portion of it, right? And we were bound by the same thing. So whoever tries to get annexed in, how do we miss the 20 days? This is the second time this has happened on this piece of property.
Well, the original one was the small one, and that was a mistake that I made, that we didn't have the proper procedures in. This one is because that they didn't get it to us in enough time. They get it to us out of time. But the revised code, as I noted in the email that I sent, has a particular saving clause for small errors like that. And this is only the consent. You will see this again, just like we did the other one, where you have to agree to actually take it in. This does not lock the city into anything. This is only moving it along the process.
So can I ask a question?
Tammy had her hand up.
I just, because I'm remembering I understood the email, but at our last meeting, you pointed out that they had not met that time.
Yes.
And but your understanding at that time was we still would have 20 days because they didn't.
And it's 20 days from the date of the date that the commissioners put it on. But because they missed theirs, we're going to get wiggle room on our 20 days, but not moving it to the next meeting. I don't think that, based upon my reading, that we would be allowed to do that.
So we thought tonight was going to be within the 20 days. Now it turns
Well,
out it's not.
It's outside of it, but it wouldn't be held against us.
Okay. I'm just trying to remember the last meeting, but
Yeah.
okay.
I'm sorry. So would this be the piece of legislation or the ordinance that we would need to amend, providing police protection and fire, or not, no, those ones stay. We don't have water in here.
We don't have water, we don't have wastewater.
So
We're
these
not-
are all the same as what we provided to the smaller piece already?
Yes, this is the exact same piece of legislation that was on the smaller piece, except the size changed, and this is 2 parcels, not 1.
Thanks, that was my question.
And I fixed the emergency clause. I tightened it up, but that's.
So
neither
what
here nor
happens
there.
if A, I don't ask to suspend the rules, and B, we suspend it gets voted down
Well,
to consent to the annexation?
well, you can choose not to consent if you can fit it into one of those 7. There are 7 specific reasons why you can withhold consent.
And the ones I read, I don't think we can. Do you?
I don't believe that we fit with any of those, no. But that's only to move the process back to the commissioners for their final decision, and then they would send it back to us whether or not we would finally agree. And there are no strictures on whether council can yes or no at that point. And there is no boundary, just like the last time.
And Rob, what's the timeline for that?
It'll come back in about 30 days or so, and then after that, it'll be between 60 and basically 120 days is when council will have to make a decision.
So what would be the logic behind not annexing property into the city?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking anyone. What would be
I'll
the
first
logic?
answer.
Go ahead.
For one, this particular property is owned by 2 people who could care less what happens out there. They don't live here. They brought the property solely to sell it to make their money. All right? 2, it's 105 acres. Not all 105 is a cornfield. There's another cornfield shot however many acres it is.
But we're not
Yeah, we just did
approving
that.
development on it at this point.
What do you think they're gonna do if they annex in the city of Mount Vernon, make a golf course on 105 acres?
Well, if they develop it outside the city limits, then they're still developing it, and we have no control over what they do there,
You've
and
made
I
that
would be
point.
concerned about that.
I'm not as concerned about that as I am. The other thing is, if you remember when we started this whole conversation, nobody come clean to us what they wanted to do. We never had a lawyer, the same lawyer that mailed the information to Columbus instead of walking it down the street 2 blocks. They never come clean. They knew what they were doing. I was the only one. I shouldn't say I was the only one, but I was the one that kept the conversation of what are they up to? Why are they only annexation this little house? All right. So that little piece, and they got their way there. And by the way, that was late. Now we come. This is late. We have no public input on this by passing this tonight. I've received 2 phone calls, 1 or 2 emails, and I know there's more out there. By doing this, the way we're doing it, we're keeping the public completely out of it. We're annexing a piece of property, and we're skipping down the road, past a residence, past a church, past another piece of property, because it ties in to the little house, which ties into the last piece of property on the country club. Now it can be annexed. And I know you don't want to call it spot zoning, but it will be. It has to be. I know, I know vote, but you asked, I told you.
That's fine.
I'm going to ask a question I probably should know the answer to. Kind of ashamed I don't. If they're annexed in, is the city required to supply water to them?
Nope.
No.
Is that the way we've designed this is that for them to get water and wastewater, they're going to have to pay to bring it to them. We're not going to pay to bring the pipes to them.
But we would be required to supply water to
Nope.
them.
The only the only people who can be required, the only service that can be required is that the health department can require them to hook up to wastewater services if there is a wastewater line
Okay.
within a certain distance. Health department nor any of our regulations require us to provide water
Okay.
to residents of the city.
Okay.
But if this does get annexed, and if it would go to municipal planning for the plan, the zoning like we've done with these other ones, part of that conversation would be supplying water and sewer, and because it's either across the road or down the road, because I'm sure the school has it. So that would be, we come into play later on as part of the plan. So this particular piece, no. There was a long conversation at regional planning the other night, and Mary, you can step in whenever you want. I asked Mr. Collier, one of the commissioners, about what their place was in this, and did they have to vote on it when this initially come to them. Basically, and I think I've got this correct, Mayor, they basically, it's a pass-through from them. They see if the paperwork's done right and take it back to the lawyer and say pass it on. And that pretty much all they have in this right now?
I understand it is with the, yes, to answer your question, I think it is, from my understanding also, is that it is unlawful for us to deny somebody outside of those reasons that Rob mentioned. If they want to annex in.
Well, the consent to.
The consent, yes.
That's this part. The part that
Second.
comes later in 120 days or, approximately.
County, city, county, city.
Yes,
You know, it's a
and
four-step
so
thing,
this is consenting to continuing the process.
Yeah.
We can only withhold consent if it falls within those 7 listed things. But that does not mean that the city is required to annex them in. That vote is later on.
So that would be, so tonight, we have to suspend the rules and vote,
Yes.
or it's against the law, pretty much.
I mean, or that they could bring suit against us, or they could, yes, there are all things they could do.
So we
That's
should have pass through like this. So then it goes back to,
the county commissioners.
and they do what?
They make sure that if we had gone and objected on one of those 7 provisions, they would decide if that objection was in fact correct. They also have to independently go and look at all those 7 too. And if they don't, if they find that they meet all of those 7, then they will then send it back to us for council to make the final determination about
So-
whether we will or will not bring this piece of property in, these pieces of property into the city.
So I'm only speaking for myself, but I doubt anybody sitting here wants to be sued, so it's gonna pass. So it goes to the commissioners, then what do they do with it after them? Who's it go to after the commissioners?
It comes back here.
Comes back
Right
here
back to us.
to
Yes.
vote on
And
annexation
then
or not.
that's then it's about 30 to 45 days, and then we start the 60 to 120 day period.
Then we have public hearing on it.
Yeah, we're required to.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have a choice here tonight. I think we have to push this
I
through.
mean,
And
Oh, we don't, that's what I said, it might as well pass through like it was for the commissioners.
I mean, that's the,
It's just
the
a
problem
consent
is
to move
the
it forward.
20-day time period that the revised code sets basically gives us almost no ability to maneuver.
Well, hopefully we can get it in a more timely manner.
Yes, in
The
the
next
future.
time. Want to make it very clear that it's not council's fault it's passing tonight without 3 readings.
So the earliest and latest we have to vote on annexation, once this comes back to us, is when?
Is between 60, the minimum time is 60 days that it has to be here, and the maximum is about 120.
So we gonna mail this to commissioners?
Horse and buggy, I think. But we can delay having legislation come back to us, right? If we have 60 to 120 days, we don't really have to move on that immediately.
No, that's why
And then
we
we have to go through 3 readings in a public hearing.
Well, I mean, we could, yeah, and we don't have to put it. The last time it came back, I actually wrote the legislation as it came back, but I put it in the computer so it didn't come up until probably 45 days after I had it, just so that it would then move the third reading in between 60 and 120 days.
That makes sense.
My goal would be to have 2 readings, have a public hearing, and then the following meeting, have the 3rd read. And I think we did that the last time, we had time allowed.
Yep.
So that would be the time slot I'd like to work with.
Yeah, that's when council makes the actual decision about whether or not this piece of legislation or these pieces of property will come into the city. This is just continuing the process with the commissioners.
Any other questions? How did, since we have a little time, type 2 annexation is not that old, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And why did we do it? I don't mean
Why?
we as Mount Vernon, but the bigger ones over our heads.
I would, while I was not there, I've been told that it has a lot to do with the way the city of Columbus gobbled up the surrounding areas.
It's changed in 2012.
Yeah.
12?
Mm-hmm.
The townships want to initiate that, so they just weren't
Yeah.
taking their property away. I'm always confused by the fact that you can vote in the township and you can vote in the city both. That's
Well, actually, when I lived in the village of Gambier, the people who live in the village of Gambier are residents of both Gambier and College Township. Always have been.
Mr. Hughes, Jim Hughes, the township trustee for Pleasant Township, was also at regional planning, and he was not happy with this. And it's partly due to they don't get all the taxes, they just get some of the tax. And maybe you could touch on that. Terry's nodding his head. Do you want to maybe fill us in on that for the public? I mean, if we're not talking about this, we're just going to talk to you down there, so.
Oh, that's okay. So you got dual citizenships on behalf of whoever would be in that proximity of that area. And yes, the county, the township would continue to receive their real estate taxes coming their way for a period of, I believe as I recall, 13 or 15 years at that point. But they still, anybody who, if it's used for residential purposes, all those people who live in that or would live in that general area become dual citizens. So they're all citizens in the township and they're also citizens of the city. and have the abilities to vote, seek office, any of those opportunities that we all are sitting here today can do in the dual citizenship.
So Terry, let's just say whoever buys this property after it's annexed comes with a plan to build another 500 homes. So then the township gets the real estate tax off of those, and we get the income tax.
Yeah, townships are not permitted to have an income tax. No township in the state of Ohio can do an income tax.
There's also concern, and I guess we can work it more in with the planning, similar to what we did with Highland Real Estate, is where it's located, and with the site of traffic and all that, if it's going to be developed in the future. And that was a concern as well.
Terry, that's about the first I've heard that after 13 years, they don't get the property tax anymore?
Yeah, there was a jurisdictional area within that time period at which they do not continue to receive, the township does not continue to receive that income or the real estate tax monies.
So that comes to the city then?
County.
Not so sure whether they do that or whether there is no taxation on that real. I'm not sure exactly on the part of it.
Because it's been almost 13 years since we had our first type 2, hasn't it?
Oh, yes, by far.
Yeah, so we ought to know,
Yeah.
you know, if it's been the 13-year time frame is over, we ought to know what in the world's happened to those property tax. You mean they may not be paying any property tax?
Perhaps, I'm not sure. I'd have to do the research on it and see where it goes from there after. Yeah.
Maybe
But I
it's
know
wait for them.
currently it's going to go to the townships. It's going to go to the townships for a significant period of time. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for this? Comments? All right, so plan is to pass it tonight. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to adjourn planning and zoning. We're now in recess until 7:30 p.m. when we start the legislative portion of the meeting.
Tammy, what time did you have your meeting over?
we've got that.
Yeah.
Just call it ignorance.
Okay.
She'll talk, but I don't know if you wanna say anything.
Okay.
It's now 7:30 PM. We're gonna call the April 24th meeting of Mount Vernon City Council Legislative Session to order. Mr. Hill, please call the roll.
Ms. Keener,
Here.
Mr. Hillier,
Here.
Mrs. Seaval,
Here.
Mr. Severance,
Here.
Mr. Mahan,
Here?
Mrs. Woods,
Here.
Mr. Francis.
Here.
We are in session. The invocation this evening will be given by Phil Lohmeyer, Mount Vernon Police Department chaplain. We appreciate these people serving as chaplains for our police department. Thank you for being here this evening. Please rise to the invocation and remain standing for the pledge.
Thanks for having me. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, as these men and women gather here this evening to perform their service to our community, we ask that you would keep them safe, protect them from the influences of this world that tend to pull us apart as they are trying to build our community together. Again, we just ask that you would keep them safe, guide their path, and continue to help this community to grow and to be safe. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, chaplain. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council, in your packets were the minutes from both the April 10th and April 17th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I'd ask for a motion for approval of both of these minutes.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and second, they be approved. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. They are approved. Mr. Hill, I see no petitions or communications. Council, in your packet were 4 committee reports for your review. I see no liquor control licenses or proclamations. We do have one person wanting to speak on matters of city concern. That's Judy Hall. Judy, please come to the podium and state your name and address. And you have 4 minutes. If you need an extension to your 4 minutes, you can ask council for another 4.
My name is Judy Hall. I'm a resident of Mount Vernon. I grew up in Knox County. I've been here 56 years, of course. I've lived in Knox County and in Mount Vernon for the last 12 years. There's been a lot of complaints on social media in regards to the water bills. The increase, how dirty the water is, the piping, the stains that are on the clothes from the water, bleach stains, whether they're colored or not. My water bill, just mine, increased from $49 a month to $96. When I did my research, there are 16,885 residents just in Knox County as of 2021. Imagine if all those people's bills went up, which I'm assuming they did. It has also been brought to our attention that when your water is being worked on or your piping, you are not notified. You do not get a notice. We called and asked the water department, and they said it was put on Facebook. Not everybody has Facebook. Not everybody has the internet. At the beginning of COVID, the window was closed down. You could not make your payments through the window. We have, I don't know how many elderly in this county. I know several because I'm a home health aide. I also know several elderly that have dementia and Alzheimer's and cannot drive. And if you go online to pay your bill, you are charged an extra $5. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous. The water's not safe to drink. It tastes horrible. And everybody tells us, well, get a softener. We shouldn't have to get a softener. It's city water. And at these prices, that's utterly ridiculous. The elderly do not know how to use online resources to pay their bill. That's an extra $5 on top of the increase already. So where is that money going? Why are the pipes not being replaced? Our children cannot drink that water. It's not healthy. I can guarantee you if I took a sample and had it sampled and had it whatever they do to it, it's not going to be safe to drink. We have to buy bottled water. So not only do we have an increase on bills, we have ruined clothes, an increase in bills, we have to buy bottled water, and we have to buy a softener. Why is that window not open for the elder that cannot get up there and drive and that don't have access to the internet and that has no family to do it for them? That's not fair. Elderly make up the majority of this county. I see one right now, right there. Sorry. What if it was him? How would you feel if it was him? If he was your dad and he had Alzheimer's and dementia and couldn't get online to pay for it, it's not fair. It needs fixed. It's a big problem in Knox County, Mount Vernon especially, for the residents that live here. The pool water, yes, it's got chlorine in it. Children go there and swim. They get that in their mouth. That's not healthy. It's not healthy. You need to reconsider the bills and opening that window.
Ma'am, can I ask a question? Before she takes off. The drive-through window is open. You can drop off your bill in there. Hey, let me finish. Can you not walk inside and pay your bill today? So you can walk inside off Gate Street.
I understand that. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is there are elderly that are not capable of getting out of their vehicles and going into that building. They have to have someone like me that is a home health aide go pay it for them.
You can drive through where the window was. There's a slot. You can slide it through. I do it every month.
Why is the window not open? What if you have
You'll
questions?
have to ask them. One other question. Have you taken your bill to the water department and asked them to break down why it went up so much?
Absolutely, and there was a thing on Facebook, an increase.
Did you go into the window or inside and ask them to look at your bill and why my bill didn't go up that much?
No, mine didn't either.
Did you ask, physically?
I particularly did not go in, but several people that have complained on Facebook have.
Well,
and they've got the breakdown.
Facebook may or may not be truthful. That's why I would.
So what you're telling me then is, if they're going to work on our water, and it's a notice put on Facebook, we can't guarantee that either.
Well,
if
it's a public notice from the city that says what has happened, but as Mr. Hillier has pointed out, I would take your bill into the department itself and ask them to show you how it went up and how much.
Okay, let me ask you this. If your water gets shut off and you're on a street where the piping is at, where they go to shut it off, that little round concrete thing, if you're parked over that and they come to shut your water off, are they allowed to tow your car?
I see nods.
The answer is yes.
We can also hold the city reliable for that. If we're not home, or if we're at work, and our car is parked over that, and they cannot get access to it to shut it off, I'm not saying it happens, but if it does, that's illegal. You're on private property for one. Come back at another time to tow the car.
If you'd like to get me your bill, my number's on the city's website. I'll be happy to look at your bill for you.
Oh, I'll take it to the water company. I have no problem. But that's not the main issue. The main issue is the stained clothes. You're raising our bill a percentage, and for what? Why are the pipes so dirty? You can't drink the water. It's not drinkable. That's not fair. Where is all the money that Knox County raises? Where for the taxes? Where is it going? The residents aren't seeing it. That's not fair. And like I said, 90% of Knox County is elderly. That's crazy. It's not fair. It needs fixed.
Okay, thank you for your time. Question I have from what she said is there's a $5 surcharge to pay online. I pay through the bank. I don't know that I pay a surcharge.
No, I don't either.
There's a surcharge if you use a credit card.
What's that?
There is a
Yes.
surcharge if you use a credit card to pay the because the credit card fee.
If you pay it through the bank, there's no charge.
Depends on which bank you have, unfortunately. Not all banks are the same, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you for your comments. We now move the legislative portion of the meeting. Council, there were 2 ordinances added today. In addition to that, are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? Mr. Hill, I'd ask you to read these by title and number only this evening. We have no resolutions for third reading. We have one for second reading. It's Resolution 2023-40. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2023-40, a resolution authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director of the City of Mount Vernon, Ohio, to enter into contract with Gray Matter Systems LLC for Water Plant Control System Phase 6 WTP Filter PLC upgrade and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2023-40 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Then moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
The roll is suspended. Mrs. Woods.
Move to adopt resolution number 2023-40.
Second.
Then moved and seconded for adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Woods.
So we had a committee meeting on this earlier, so unless anybody has any further questions, obviously some needed repairs at the water treatment plant, so.
Mr. Hill.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Now I move to resolutions for first reading. The first one is Resolution 2023-44. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2023-44, a resolution approving the appointment of Jason West as an alternate member to the Municipal Planning Commission of Mount Vernon, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request suspension of the rules requiring 3 separate readings. Take resolution 2023-44 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Then moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mr. Francis.
Move to adopt resolution 2023-44.
Second.
Then moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mr. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the appointment of Jason West.
Yes, sir.
Give us a little biography on Mr. West.
Sure, be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Francis and Council. Jason West, first of all, is replacing Todd Hawkins's spot since he moved into a full-time voting member. And so Jason will be performing the alternate voting duties in Todd's place there. Jason is he's a production manager for AMG Production. That's this industries and produce products split, and he's on the product side of things. Raising a family here in Mount Vernon, and was very excited to start serving the community in this particular fashion. So he's got family, and he wants to see about making decisions for the future of his family.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions? And thank you, Jason, just in case he's watching.
Mr. Hill.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is Resolution 2023-45. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2023-45, a resolution approving the reappointment of Susie Simpson as member to the Board of Zoning Appeals of Mount Vernon, Ohio for a 5-year term and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Francis.
Request suspension of the rules requiring 3 separate readings. Take resolution 2023-45 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
The roll is suspended. Mr. Francis.
Move to adopt resolution 2023-45.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mr.
Thank
Francis.
you, Mr. President. This is the reappointment of Susie Simpson to the Board of Zoning Appeals. She's been on this board for how long?
Oh, gosh. I don't know, a couple of terms. I think this is a couple of terms.
Okay, because I think her first term was when I was first on council. So I think I went to school with her. And I thought, well, that's, one of those things people getting involved. And I believe she used to work for or still does, work for the state of Ohio.
She works for Knox Mobility.
Okay.
And not to be confused with Knox Area Transit, they do work together, but she does help find people rides and transportation to and from places in and around Knox County and Columbus and various other places.
So she's got a lot of hours in on the Board of Zoning.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seavolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. The final resolution for this evening is Resolution 2023-46. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2023-46, a resolution approving the reappointment of Lacey Filkins to the Historical Review Commission of the City of Mount Vernon, Ohio, for a one-year term and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request suspension of the rules requiring 3 separate readings. Take Resolution 2023-46 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seavolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mr. Francis.
Move to adopt Resolution 2023-46.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mr. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. President. This again is our reappointment to Lacey Filkins. You want to give us some background on Lacey?
Thank you
Been
again.
with us for a while.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Francis and council. Lacey Filkins is the director, executive director, or coordinator at Experience Mount Vernon. And so she is very well connected to the downtown development that we partner with. We partner with her on a variety of things. She does have some training in this through her schooling in college in terms of historical review, and she has enjoyed being on the Historical Review Commission and looks forward to another year of being reappointed.
Any other
Mike.
discussion?
If I could, council, if you remember, last year when she was appointed, I did have opposition to this. Not because of Ms. Filkins wouldn't do a good job, but she doesn't live in the historic district. I always feel that if you're gonna make rules for somebody that lives somewhere, she should have to abide by the same rules. Historic district does have some pretty stringent rules you have to follow. I just don't feel that it's not proper to vote on something that you wouldn't have to abide to yourself. In the same respect, we have people on committees that don't live in the city of Mount Vernon, and I disagree with that. I look to the administration, maybe work a little harder to find people in town, in the city of Mount Vernon for those boards. I appreciate her work, but she doesn't live in the district.
Any other questions? Mr. Hill.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
No.
Mrs. Seavolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
The resolution is adopted. Now we move to ordinances for third reading. The first one is ordinance number 2023-10. Mr. Hill.
Ordinance number 2023-10, an ordinance to approve, adopt, and enact the February 2023 replacement pages to the codified ordinances, to repeal ordinances in conflict therewith, to publish the enactment of new matter, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt ordinance 2023-10, please.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this ordinance. Any discussion? Mr. Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Here they are. Like I said before, I've looked at it, Mr. Hill has. I have not heard anything. I've taken this to the third reading. I think it's proper to pass it tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Hill.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seavolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted. Next ordinance is ordinance number 2023-12. Mr. Hill.
Ordinance number 2023-12, an ordinance fixing the number of hourly employees in the City of Mount Vernon Police Department and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Mahan.
Mr. President, I move to adopt ordinance number 2023-12.
Second?
Been moved and second for the adoption of this ordinance. Any discussion? Mr. Mahan.
Council, we had a committee meeting on this 2 weeks ago. The money is within budget. It's been appropriated. Any questions for the chief or for Mr. Zick before we vote this evening?
Chief, I just wanted to say, you know, I'd ask you, I don't know how long it's been now, that when you felt the need to please come to council, and I admire you for staying ahead of the curve on this. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Hillier.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval.
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted. The next now we move to ordinances for second reading. First one there is ordinance number 2023-14. Mr. Hill.
Ordinance number 2023-14, an ordinance to create the position of liaison for the Community Advocacy Relations Division of the Mount Vernon Police Department and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll give ordinance 2023-14 second reading, and you have me down for a 10-minute committee meeting. Thank you.
This ordinance receives its second reading. Now we move to ordinances for first reading. The first one is ordinance number 2023-17. Mr. Hill.
Ordinance number 2023-17, an ordinance amending the zoning classification of parcel number 66-05329.000 and parcel number 66-02335.000, also known as 301 and 303 North Norton Street respectively, from the present zoning of R1 Single Family District to PCDD Planned Commercial Development District and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hillier.
Mr. President, I'd like to give this a first reading and ask for a 15-minute meeting, the next one, and Mr. Filkins said he'd be here to talk to us about this.
This ordinance receives its first reading. Now we move to the two ordinances that were added today. The first one is ordinance number 2023-18. Mr. Hill.
Ordinance number 2023-18, an ordinance consenting to the annexation of 105.65 acres, parcel numbers 59.02289.000 and 59-02289.001 from Pleasant Township into the City of Mount Vernon, providing for certain city services to the annexed parcel, and providing protections against incompatible uses under existing township zoning, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hillier.
Mr. President, I move to suspend the rule for 3 separate readings and take ordinance 2023-18 to its third and final reading, please.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension?
Mr. President, we talked about this extensively at a committee meeting, and basically, it wouldn't be my choice to do this, but our law director has directed us to do so or be sued.
Okay. Any other discussion on the rule suspension? Mr. Hill.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Hillier.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval.
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mr. Hillier.
Mr. President, I move to amend ordinance 2023-18, section 2, strike out A, B, C, and D. It's been brought to my attention we do not have to offer this service.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded that this ordinance be amended. Any discussion on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Brown, on section 2, A, B, C, and D, I understand that we may have to consent to the annexation, but we do not have to offer these services. Is that correct?
It is correct that we do not have to offer them. I would note, however, that the stormwater, offering stormwater services merely allows us to charge them the fee. We don't actually provide any other services specifically to that parcel. So by deleting that one, you're just depriving the stormwater utility of money. But yes, you are correct. We are not required to.
Regarding, if I could, emergency medical services, the fire department, the Mount Vernon Fire Department already provides medical to
That's
that
correct.
township, is that correct?
That's
Yep.
correct.
And that would also include the fire protection then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't understand why we would strike them if those are services we're already providing to that property.
Because it'll be provided through the contract through the township.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Braun, so if this is annexed, which I'm sure it's gonna be, they can come back and ask for these services, correct?
I'm sure. I've never run across that, so I'd have to look that up.
I'm gonna
So,
go ahead.
no.
I'm gonna go back to my prior question about water. So you annex a piece of property into the city, and you said we're not obligated to give them water. We're not obligated to give them the other services? Okay. Learning a lot tonight.
Anybody else before I ask a question? So, Mr. President, it sounds like, what our city law director says that I should change my amendment not to include D.
Is there a second? to
Well,
the
there was already a
amendment to the-
second, well, there's already a second on scratching A, B, C, and D.
And I have to change my
I know, but we
amendment
can
not
amend
to
the
include
amendment.
D.
Are you asking to amend the amendment, right?
I'm asking that we not to include D, we scratch A, B, and C.
Okay, there's an amendment to the amendment. Is there a second to the amendment to the amendment?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to amend the amendment to not include D and the scratching. Any discussion on the amendment to the amendment?
I
So-
guess I'll just speak out and just say I'm against striking these. I don't know why we wouldn't do this. So that's just my opinion.
We'll be voting on the amendment, correct?
Yes.
No. We're voting on the amendment to the amendment.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Mr. Hill?
Ms. Keener,
No.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seavolt,
No.
Mr. Severns,
No.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes to the amendment on the amendment.
Mrs. Woods,
Smart man.
I think I'm voting yes to the amendment on the, so I'm getting really confused, guys. So we're voting to keep D. Is that what
Yes.
we're voting?
Right. Mhm.
Yes.
Oh. I changed my vote to yes then.
So you still will have to vote on the amendment about
Right.
whether you're going to strike anything.
Correct.
and Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Okay, after we've already called the roll, he can change his vote, Mr. Law Director? Okay.
I mean, I needed clarification. So what was the final vote on that, Mr. Hill?
4 yes and 3 no.
Okay. So on the amendment to the amendment, it was 4 yeses and 3 nos. Now we go back to the amendment. And the amendment is
To strike
as
A,
amended.
C.
The amendment as amended is to strike A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm.
Discussion on the amendment.
For clarification, this matches what was given to the first parcel.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And they would still have police, fire, and EMS. It's just,
Nope. They would not have police protection.
okay, they would still have EMS services,
And
just
fire.
billable, and fire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
By contract. Any other questions on the amendment?
Let's clarify what a yes and a no means here. Because I
Voting
am
yes.
turned around now.
Okay, the
Voting
yes
yes
means that we're striking A, B, and C, but not D.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And a no means we're not scratching anything.
That's correct.
Correct.
That's correct.
Right.
And do we know if we can add these back in at a later time?
Never run across that question before.
So there's a possibility that we would annex a property in at which we cannot provide police protection.
I think that that's a strange outcome, but I can't tell you that that's not what would happen because we've
We-
never run across this before.
So there's no evidence that says that this has happened in
I
the
have
past.
never done any research in it, so I don't know one way or the other.
Thank you.
And Rob, so this came to you, and because of timing, we basically have to approve it,
Yes.
but you can't tell us if we have to approve it as is? Do you see what I'm asking?
No. What I'm suggesting is that the thing about police, fire, and EMS, it would seem silly that we could not decide to then provide them.
Later.
But later. But these annexations are odd birds because they're all statutory. And so I've never run across this. And so because I have not run across this question, it's difficult for me to say yes or no. I
And we
agree that-
will vote on this again before it's final.
But no, not the services you're going to provide.
Okay. Okay.
You're just going to, the final vote will be whether or not you actually take the property into the
This is
city.
determining services.
This is just
Okay.
determining services.
Okay.
Other discussion on the amendment? Mr. Hill?
Ms. Keener,
No.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seavolt,
No.
Mr. Severance,
No.
Mr. Mahan,
No.
Mrs. Woods,
Oh, what the heck, yes.
Mr. Francis.
I'm
Yes,
so confused.
That was a yes?
yes.
That is, 4 noes and 3 yes.
Amendment.
4 noes and 3 yeses.
So they stay in there.
Yes, the amendment fails.
So the amendment is not adopted. We now go back to the original,
Well,
2023-18.
well, we need
the
a-
original resolution
I'll adopt.
as submitted. Any discussion on
Mr.
2020?
President, I move to adopt
Yeah.
ordinance 2023-18, please.
Second.
Been moved and second for the adoption of this ordinance. Any discussion? Mr. Hillier?
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, I think if you can go back to a Commons Dispatch article, I believe couldn't have been Saturday, so it had to be Sunday, where Granville is working with their townships to try to preserve the countryside around Granville. Google the article if you can't. I have a copy. I'll figure out how to get it to you. But it's a way that possibly may work, that we're not gonna have everybody that wants to be, that these people don't even live in Mount Vernon. They're here to make a buck. They don't care what's built out there. They want to annex, they're gonna sell it to the next guy. It's a good article to read.
Any other discussion on the original amendment? Mr. Hill?
The original,
Original to adopt.
Yeah.
adopt.
What's that?
We're voting to adopt.
Adopt, right. I mean, not the original amendment, the original ordinance. Mr. Hill?
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
No.
Mrs. Seavolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severance,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted. Now we move to the final ordinance, ordinance number 2023-19. Mr. Hill?
Ordinance number 2023-19, an ordinance setting hourly compensation for part-time and seasonal personnel in the city of Mount Vernon and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Francis?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I'll give ordinance 2023-19 a first reading, and we're scheduled for a committee meeting. That allow everybody to get a hold of Mr. Zick. There were questions brought up about what positions are or are not on that list and don't need to be on that. Thank you, Mr. President.
This resolution receives its first reading. That concludes the legislative portion of the meeting. We now move to remarks from administration. Mayor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. President and Council. Just 2 quick things. Arbor Day is going to be this Friday, 2:30 p.m. We will have a celebration, a ceremony at Twin Oak Elementary. Again, 2:30 this Friday. If you can make it, that would be great. It's always fun to have to do this with the elementary schools. And so, yeah, you're all invited to that. Also, just coming up, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so, urge you to reach out to those agencies in our community that provide mental health services and get to know them and thank them for what they do and see what we can all do to work together to help improve mental health and awareness of mental health issues in our community. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Zick?
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Scott?
Nothing further, Mr. President.
Mr. Stoller? Mr. Braun?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Francis?
I just, been something that's been on my mind, and I've not said it here because it's public forum, but that little voice in my head says, you gotta say it tonight. Everything that's going on in the world, everything that's going on around us, one thing, in the beginning, God created. God don't make mistakes. And he gives everything to provide for us because he's given us dominion over it. So it belongs to us anyways. So whenever I see this stuff going on, I can just look and think, you know what? In the beginning, God created. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Severance?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to point out the retirement of a good friend of mine and actually my boss, Dr. Henry Spalding from Mount Vernon Nazarene University. He will be retiring this spring. His last day, technically, I guess, is our May commencement, which is Saturday, May 6th. Tomorrow afternoon, we do have a retirement celebration for him at MVNU in Foster Hall. It's by invitation. The mayor and myself will be there. I'm sure Mr. Mahan and other employees will be there. But Dr. Spalding has done a lot of really good things for MVNU. He first came to the university as our VP of Academic Affairs and came at a really troubled time, honestly, for us academically. And he did wonderful things to help solidify our faculty, to bring some new academic programs to the university that have been good for us and lucrative. Not without challenges, but his experience has been great. One of the things I want to say, and I actually speak tomorrow. I have less than 2 minutes to speak because we have to be quick. But Dr. Spalding loves the university. He loves our students, as his wife does, our faculty and staff. He loves this MVNU community. I've had the privilege of having lunch with Dr. Spalding probably every 5 to 6 weeks. And we talk well. He speaks well of Mount Vernon community, and that's important. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow, even though it's kind of bittersweet. And the mayor will present a proclamation to Dr. Spalding as well, which ought to be a good time. So I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Spalding, for your service to our university. It's been a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mahan?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Mrs. Skinner?
I would just like to say that I really appreciate Mike's effort. I think that he and I are working towards the same goals, but sometimes we take different approaches, and I just appreciate anybody who is going to fight with such tenacity for something that they believe in. So I really appreciate what you tried to do. That's all, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mrs. Woods?
So I'm going to speak for all of us sitting up here for a minute because I think it's clear that everybody sitting up here puts a lot of thoughtful consideration into our decisions. But I have to say that is really difficult to do when the agenda changes at 11:22 on the morning of the meeting. I got the pleasure of walking in here late because I was unaware, obviously I come from work, that a committee meeting had been added, and when I pulled in and saw I was not the last one, but close to it. So is there anything we can do about agendas being set a specific time? I mean, I'd like to be better prepared for stuff. Like tonight, I felt like I made a decision on something that I was just completely unprepared
I would
for.
like to be notified when the agendas change, especially late. Especially since I'm on the radio, it's embarrassing to me to be on the radio and to tell the public when we're meeting and then we change it. So please notify me and I'll notify council and see if they want to do it, because this is not the administration's meeting, this is council's meeting. And council needs to decide what we're going to have and when we're going to do it. And I'm opposed to having late changes. We did decide as a council to have the agendas come out on Wednesday so council can study it before it comes out, and that gives us a chance to know what we're talking about, and that's important. And it's important for the community to know when we're doing it. I understand sometimes if there's a bill has to be paid, something like that, it has to be done, you know, and whoever sent us the bill wants paid, and I understand that. But when you get into other legislation like this and changing committee times, I need to know that before it happens.
Thank you.
Mr. Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. President. A few things. Amber, the one reason I'm so passionate, I've lived here all my life. My parents have been from here. My wife, her parents. We have seen a lot of change. Colonial Hills, I used to rabbit hunt there. So I have seen that change. What I don't like, and we're going to have another one going through municipal planning here real soon. And if you haven't heard, there's people upset about it. And that particular, there's another one. Mount Vernon's where it's got to go. I got this to do. We're going to go in and sell it, build it, and probably go back to Maryland or where we're from. And we have to do some proper planning. It's not, if you look at what we've been told and look what's going on in the country, I don't know where all these people are living, need all these houses, but we need all these homes. So it's going to happen. But we've got to do it in a way that we're not fighting a battle that we're fighting on Vernon View Drive right now. And I think I knew it was going to pass. I knew I was going to be a no vote, but it got a lot of discussion. And I think we've got to be looking at more than just we need houses. The Granville article is a very good article, and they want to keep their community. All right, they don't want people coming in from out of town saying we're going to do this in your town, and they've done that legally within the law, and that's what we got to think of going forward. I do appreciate what your thoughts were. I guess this is to all, maybe the mayor. Experience Mount Vernon. I saw their First Friday list, which starts in June. Mm-hmm. They had on their advertisement they're doing Dora. Okay, yeah. If you go to their Facebook, each month has a little Dora circle. And I'm pretty sure when we talked about Dora for downtown Mount Vernon, it was special events only. And Anthony came and talked to us right before he left about it was too much work. It was too much work to get the signs out and this and that. He wanted to go to a permanent Dora. Prior to that, though, we had the discussion, and I don't know if it's in the orders because I didn't have enough time, because I saw right before I came. But First Fridays were going to be off balance for Dora. And when I saw that, I was surprised. Has anybody in administration had conversations about Dora since Anthony?
The only thing we've talked about is they are working on getting signage around the boundaries, some permanent signage so that it's apparent. That's the only conversation I've had with Lacey. I did recall reading an email that I forwarded to Rob that he's going to have to look at. He just got it tonight about something they're hearing from the Liquor Control Commission about whether you can or can't modify the boundary. It's still an event-based thing, but Experience Mount Vernon is also the board that approves or doesn't approve Doras. So.
We might want to look at that and how it pertains to our Experience Mount Vernon, our downtown. I know Anthony was very passionate about opening up. So many days a week, so many hours a day. But if I'm not mistaken, we have an ordinance that states when it was to be, where it was going to be event only. And I don't know if it's in the ordinance or not about First Fridays, but I know there was an agreement.
I don't believe First Friday's in the ordinance, but it is my understanding is it is still functioning as an event-based Dora. There is no permanent hours of operation.
Yeah,
for the
my
Dora.
recollection is that it is event-based, but I don't remember there being an exclusion for First Friday specifically in the ordinance.
I can have Anthony come back in. We had an agreement, Mel, and I think you followed me up on that.
Yeah.
That First Friday was not going to happen.
That's what I thought I understood.
And I'm not saying it's permanent, but it has to come back to council, in my feelings, if they want to do it for First Fridays.
And let me make one other point, that I thought that even the permanent signage was going to have to come back here before that was permitted. I know one thing they didn't want to do was to do the tripod things constantly and have to put those out every time they had an event, but I thought that would have been part of, You know, we don't want
Because the
too
if
much
my
signage down there.
recollection is that the legislation requires the temporary posting to allow them to adjust it. And they had talked about doing permanent signage, and I believe that Mr. Severns is correct, that that does need to come back to
Correct.
council if that's
we
the way they
would
want
need
to
to
go.
see that before that goes that way. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mrs. Siebel.
Thank you. I agree with you. That is a very hard thing about Mr. Spalding, the President Spalding, because he is a super person. And I hate to see him retire, but he deserves it. But he is a very special person, and we've been very fortunate to have him in our community and in our lives. And definitely we'll miss him. He's been a great addition to the college and to our community. So I hate to see him go, but I'm happy that he's getting to retire. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And things are gonna start happening, as I understand it, the market of the square starts the first Saturday of May, is that correct? And for those that go to the point, that's gonna open up this Saturday, so the fruits and vegetables are gonna be out there. Things are beginning to happen as far as spring, even though today it didn't quite feel like it. So I appreciate that. Appreciate the media, Cheryl, for being here this evening. That being said, I call for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
Then moving and second, we adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.